Some intense rain for a few hours first thing could cause some issues, but it does move through. It clears England and Wales during the morning, as well as Northern Ireland. Brighter skies follow, albeit with blustery showers. Then the rain pushes into northern Scotland with gusty wind accompanying it, and those gales continuing along with showers for Shetland. But it's a showery afternoon for many places, essentially. The best of any drier and sunnier interludes for eastern England. Otherwise, those showers rattling in from the southwest and continuing during the evening on Wednesday, as well as overnight. They'll move into northern England, Scotland as well, falling as snow over the Scottish mountains. There'll be some clear spells in between, and the strongest of the winds will affect western and southern areas. It's in these areas where temperatures will hold up overnight at 8 to 10 Celsius, but where we get some shelter towards the east and northeast, mid to low single figures are possible. A bright start in places first thing Thursday, but still some showers moving north across northern England, Wales and Scotland. Then the next batch of wet and windy weather moves through Northern Ireland by the end of the afternoon, pushing into Wales, England and Scotland later. It does move through quickly, followed by further showers.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narinda.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Good evening, it's 6 p.m. and this is Dewbs and Co. Don't worry, you're watching the right channel. I'm Emily Carver, filling in for Michelle Dewberry. Now, one thing you won't have asked for this Christmas are rail strikes. The RMT union has delivered another round of festive misery for commuters, announcing they'll walk out in the middle of December and again in January. The Rail Delivery Group says the strikes have cost the industry £250 million. So I'll be asking, is this all rather self-defeating? And the Labour leader makes a pitch to business leaders: wean yourself off low-wage immigration. It wasn't too long ago, of course, that he was extolling the virtues of freedom of movement. Do you believe he's had a change of heart? Do you trust Keir Starmer more than Rishi Sunak when it comes to immigration? And Shell says it's re-evaluating its investments in the UK after the windfall tax on oil and gas companies was extended. Is the new tax value for money? And the Conservative Party apparently has a problem with millennials, according to one think tanker. He's resigned his position at a leading Tory group and says the party is failing his generation. All of that to come tonight on Dewbs and Co. But first, let's get to the news headlines.
I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. The RMT union has announced new industrial action over the festive period. It says its members will not work overtime over Christmas and will stage a series of 48-hour strikes in December and January. Dates include the 13th to 14th and 16th to 17th of December and the 3rd to 4th and 6th to 7th of January. It's in the long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch says the union has been reasonable and that the government is blocking any resolutions.
The whole process has become a farce that only the new Secretary of State can now resolve. And I will be calling on him to act up to his responsibilities this Thursday. In the meantime, our message to the public is we are sorry to inconvenience you, but we urge you to direct your anger and frustration at the government and the railway employers during this latest phase of action.
Nottinghamshire police say the mother of 2 young children who were killed in a flat fire has died. The case is now being treated as a triple murder. Will Hollis is at the scene in Clifton and brings us up to date with what's happened.
Yes, well, Nottinghamshire Police has now released the names of all 3 of the victims in what they're calling a deeply upsetting tragedy. The mother, who was pronounced dead earlier today at Nottinghamshire's Queen's Medical Centre, has been named as Fatuma Haidara, aged 28. Her 2 children have also been named Fatima Drama, aged 3, and Neymar Drama, aged 1 year old. Police and fire investigations led to the conclusion that this was a fire that started deliberately. They currently hold a man in custody, a 31-year-old man from Clifton. They've been given an extension of 36 hours to continue their questioning. Now, the Detective Chief Inspector who's leading the investigation has said that the father of the 2 children and the husband of the mother wasn't in the fire at the time, in the flat at the time of the fire. He was actually outside of the UK and is now being supported by specially trained officers. They're asking for the respect of him and the entire family at what is clearly quite a difficult time. But people here in Clifton and from the wider Nottingham area have been coming to Fair Isle Close to leave floral tributes. And a man who I spoke to just a few moments ago said that he is completely heartbroken by what's happened in his community.
Thank you. Will Hollis joining us there from the scene in Nottingham. The UK must wean itself off immigration dependency. That's the message from the Labour leader to business bosses. Sir Keir Starmer told the Confederation of Business Industry the days of low pay and cheap labour must end, and it's time to invest in training those already in the UK. He also promised to be pragmatic about the shortage of workers, saying if he gets into government, he's willing to accept increased skilled immigration. The Home Office says a migrant processing centre in Kent is now completely empty after concerns it had become extremely overcrowded. It said the Manston site, used to temporarily house people who've reached the UK via the English Channel, has been cleared, having moved everyone that was there to hotels. At its peak earlier this month, the centre was holding 4,000 migrants, at least double its capacity, living in conditions an inspector called wretched. Energy suppliers have been named and shamed for failing vulnerable customers, with regulator Ofgem saying problems across the board need to be urgently addressed. A review found severe weaknesses at 5 companies: Good Energy, Outfox, So Energy, True Energy and Utilita. Ofgem say households are missing out on free gas safety checks and firms aren't doing enough to identify those on prepayment meters who may need help. In total, 17 suppliers have been told they need to improve their approach to vulnerable customers. Expats are protesting against a real-term reduction in their UK state pensions. Nearly 500,000 OAPs live in countries that don't have an uprating agreement with the UK, which means their state pension is frozen at the level it was when they started receiving the payment. The number of people killed during the Indonesian earthquake has risen to 268. Many of the victims are children. Disaster relief officials say 151 people are still missing a day after the 5.6 magnitude quake hit West Java. A number of aftershocks have hit the region, triggering landslides and hampering rescue efforts. The latest figures suggest more than 58,000 people have been displaced and 22,000 homes have been damaged. Footballer Cristiano Ronaldo is leaving Manchester United with immediate effect as part of a mutual agreement with the club. It's after the 37-year-old criticised the club and its management last week. In a statement, the club thanked him for his immense contribution during his 2 spells at Old Trafford. Cristiano Ronaldo said, "I love Manchester United and I love the fans. That will never, ever change, but it feels like the right time for me to seek a new challenge." Saudi Arabia have beaten tournament favourites Argentina 2-1 in their opening match of the World Cup in Qatar. Argentina, who've been unbeaten since 2019, suffered what's been called a shock defeat to Saudi Arabia, ranked 51st in FIFA World Rankings compared to Argentina's 3rd place. An early penalty scored by Lionel Messi was countered by 2 quick goals by Saudi Arabia in the second half. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs and Co.
Yes, welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Emily Carver. Michelle is taking a well-earned break for the week, so you'll have me tonight and also Thursday and Friday. Now, I'll introduce my panel with me until 7. We have former MEP, now Conservative Life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, and Atul Hatwal, who is the editor of Labour Uncut. What is Labour Uncut?
Labour Uncut, we're an online site. We cover Labour news. We cover it from a centre, within the Labour Party centre-right perspective, centrist perspective, probably Blairite, you'd say.
OK, well, that would be interesting to get your opinion on Keir Starmer's slight change in tone when it comes to immigration. But please do let me know all your thoughts throughout the show. We're going to be looking at the rail strikes, which will be taking place in December and January. Mick Lynch is out there rallying the troops for his cause. Do you support him, or do you think that it could be a bit self-defeating? They're costing the industry huge amounts of money. Obviously, Keir Starmer has been making lots of remarks when it comes to immigration. Are we going to be weaning the economy off cheap labour? Is that the way to go? Do you trust the Labour Party when it comes to immigration? We're also going to be talking about whether the Conservatives have got it wrong when it comes to millennials. So please do get in touch with me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or on Twitter @gbnews or @CarverEmily. So, looks like you'll be driving home for Christmas this year, as rail workers have just announced a new wave of strikes for December. The RMT union will strike on 13th and 14th and the 16th and 17th of December, then again in January. The General Secretary, Mick Lynch, says workers want a good deal on security, pay and conditions. Atul, it does seem to me sometimes, and to some of our viewers, that Mick Lynch is holding the country a little bit to ransom with his demands.
I think people can generally understand that with the cost of living, inflation, workers will do what they can to boost their wages. Now, on the specific instance of this range of strikes, it's very hard to understand, to know the detail of what's happening in those negotiations, because normally unions will negotiate with employers. Here it's different because the government's involved. So what Mick Lynch was saying, there was a deal, it was coming. They thought there was going to be no need for strikes. The rail employers were lined up, and then with less than an hour to go, mysteriously the deal gets pulled, and now Mick Lynch has got to go see the new Secretary of State for Transport. And it smells a little bit like maybe there's a new Secretary of State, he wants a bit of publicity, and so everything's been derailed a bit. So that one doesn't quite know the detail of what's happening in those negotiations.
Yes, it does seem a little bit opaque at the moment. It's hard to know how close they've got to a settlement, whether there is a settlement on the table that Mick Lynch is simply refusing, not good enough for him, or whether it's a little bit more complicated than that. Now, I'm asking whether, Jacqueline, whether this is all a bit self-defeating. We saw over the course of the pandemic that the government pumped huge amounts of taxpayers' money into the rail industry to keep it afloat. All of this strike action is costing the industry more and more money, apparently 250 million, perhaps, the strikes so far. Could it be that they're actually paving the way for more redundancies and closures to come? Because there simply isn't the money.
Well, I think it's extremely disappointing, and I think it's actually quite avoidable. In my former life, before even going into the European Parliament, I spent 13 years as a trade union negotiator. 3 of those with the Transport and General Workers Union, and then 10 with a union that we formed a number of years later.
You must have seen some scenes.
I've seen some scenes. I have been on the picket line. I've taken them out to strike. So I'm not sitting here as somebody who's anti-trade union. But trade unions also have a responsibility. And I think the point that you picked up on, during the 2 years during COVID, the taxpayer actually put in about £17 billion to keep the railways afloat, because obviously we needed them to be in place. Like the public sector, we spent billions to make sure once we came out of COVID that obviously we had a railway left. In addition to that, I've been commuting on Avanti, which was Virgin, for about 20 years, and I chat to the staff. And what I'm a bit surprised about, well, I was taken aback, actually, talking to the staff fairly recently. I said, well, where are you up to with this? What exactly is going on? I said, I know there's the 8%, but what are the other issues involved in this negotiation on terms and conditions? There is an issue about taking an early pension. There was a structure that they had in place that I know that they want to change. But I did say to him also, the particular person I was talking about, and others, I said, so how much do you get a day for strike pay? And this is RMT, I don't know about the other unions. And he said, we haven't had any strike pay. So I said, well, what do you mean? I said, when you go out on strike, your trade union normally gives you strike pay. I said, it's not necessarily going to be the equivalent of what you would earn in a day. It might be 25 quid. It could be more than that. And they have not received 1 day's pay for strike pay, nothing towards it. So now we're looking at going into 21 days by the time we add up December and January, which isn't just 3 weeks disruption. It's gone on over a period of time, because obviously railways don't, start the next day if you've actually taken industrial action. And the other question I want to know is, was the deal ever set? I mean, I said, have you ever been balloted on the deal that's on the table? And he said, well, no, we get emails. And I said, well, what do the emails say? So he said, well, they sort of keep us up to date. So
it seems that the members of the trade union themselves are being held to ransom.
Well,
I think that's a gross mischaracterisation of the position that's happening with the RMT.
I actually speak to the people who work on the trains. I'd just like to conclude, and then
let Jacqueline finish, and then we'll come straight back to you.
Because the thing is, in any negotiation, of course, it can go on ad nauseum, it can go on ad infinitum, but you've got to get to a position whereby, as you quite rightly say, you have to look at what the losses are, not just the 250 million we've said to the company, but to the members themselves. There's no recompense, certainly, for those in the RMT. And it appears that the deal, even before where we'd got to today, I've no idea what's happened today, you've got to, at some stage, you have to put the deal to the members to say to the members, this is where we've got to. Do you agree with where we've got to, or don't you? And then you move on to the next phase.
Atul, you're itching to come in.
I am. The point you've just made is probably Mick Lynch's point. The deal was coming. The deal was less than an hour away. To put something to the members, there has to be a deal agreed where the union's happy, the union leadership who've been elected and deputed to negotiate on members' behalf, where the rail employers are happy, and that goes to the members. We were 55 minutes away from that happening.
But they have had previous pay offers, which they've rejected out of hand.
There have been packages before. And I'm sorry, call me cynical, that all of a sudden, 55 minutes before you've got to a certain point, and then the trade union... I've been there. I know what we do. I know how we negotiate.
You must know these kind of
I am not convinced. I am not convinced.
You can tell from his demeanour.
55 minutes.
You can tell from his demeanour.
You
can tell from his demeanour. It's a different sort of press conference. He's absolutely furious.
They
called off the strikes last time, and I speak as someone who's not a natural ally of all unions at Labour Uncut. We are a critical friend to the unions. We don't believe in kind of never-ending strikes. But if a deal is on the table because you have negotiated in good faith with the employers, and the employers have given you the outline, and you know there's something there, and that's going to go to the members, and that gets pulled...
I must ask you, as a Labour voice, would Labour essentially just give in to all demands? Because at the moment, we've got coordinated strike action. That's what it looks like. I've got here. We've got the civil servants. We've got nurses, bus drivers, rail workers, postal workers, security staff, university staff, firefighters, teachers, and so on. If the government were to just write a blank cheque, we'd be bankrupt as a nation, would we
absolutely
not?
zero chance that Keir Starmer's Labour Party will give in and write a blank cheque. You only have to.
Well, he used to be out on the picket line.
You only have to look at the experience of when Labour were last in power under Tony Blair, and Keir Starmer's charting a very similar course. There was no blank cheque to the unions. But what Labour will do is take some of the politics out of it. That means government stepping back, letting the employers talk to the unions and get round the table and come to a deal. And if they aren't doing that, that's where government steps in, bangs heads together and says, sort this out.
May I just raise one point before we get the views of our viewers at home? Is not one of the key issues here that they're not willing to, not just on pay, they're not willing to budge on any working conditions that are, in some people's view, very archaic?
Well, there are archaic. I mean, just as an example, and it's only a very small part, we have the technology which is called drones. I've been involved with the aerospace and the drone industry and aviation industry for many years. I think we've got to be one of the only modern countries on this planet where we have railway workers walking along lines to check if the line's safe before the trains start to run. I mean, and they want to keep a practice like that, which is in itself unsafe. I mean, the whole point of using the technology that we have today is for safety for the people that are actually employed.
And it must be
said...
And
that's just one very small example. But I understand also that from the people I've been talking to on Avanti, that they are starting to put into place their new rostering next week and the week after that. So that was apparently supposed to be part of this negotiation. So, frankly, I don't know what's actually happening, but whatever's happening, the disruption and the cost to the employees and the cost actually to, that's just the workforce, and the cost to industry and the cost to everything actually is just absolutely
It's astronomical. And it must be said that in terms of railway workers, they are, on average, paid more than similar jobs in the private sector or non-unionised jobs. There's a lot of people who are suffering the consequences of inflation, not just railway workers. Ian from Colsterworth, I think that's how you pronounce that area, I'm not sure where that is actually. During COVID, I'm sure all these public employed workers were drawing their normal pay and no layoffs. As for the most industrious workforce who got furlough at best, yes, that's pointed to what we said earlier about the fact that, of course, the taxpayer did have to spend huge amounts of money propping up the industry. Atul, would you like to make a comment on that?
That was an investment in the future of the United Kingdom. You can't let people starve. You can't let the country go to the wall. Yes, people were on furlough, but it was to keep our economy alive, to make sure that we don't have penury, that we don't have starvation in our country. The pay negotiation is a completely separate issue to what happened with furlough, which was right, and it was done under a Conservative government, and that was right, and that was a good policy.
No, but what I'm saying is that, unfortunately, the reality is now that there isn't the money to spend on massive inflation-busting pay rises across the board for all workers within the railway or elsewhere in the public sector. It just doesn't add up.
We're talking very specifically in this instance about the rail strikes that are coming. There was a deal. The employers clearly felt there was money. It's their budget. We don't know their budget. As Jacqueline said, we don't know what's happening in that negotiation.
But I must say, Margaret, who's sitting at home, she says, "Your apology is pathetic, Mr Lynch. I am not going to travel this Christmas. I cannot risk not being able to use the train and be stuck with no way home. Thanks for keeping me home after not travelling for the last 2 winter holiday seasons because of COVID." And this is why I say it's all self-defeating, because people have found different options. They're being pushed off the railways because they're actually finding out that a car might be easier. Yesterday, I couldn't get back home. I live outside of London because the railways had decided to strike, and I had no idea there was a strike going ahead yesterday evening, so instead got a car all the way back. So it is self-defeating, I would say. We're going to move on now, though.
But don't forget, they've also got an overtime ban.
Well, this as well.
Between the 18th of December and the 2nd of January. And normally, certainly in the travel industry and these industries, people do like to have some overtime. Of course they do, because they're working the bank holidays and various things.
Yeah.
If you've also got that in place, I mean, the listener, the viewer that's just commented there, you will find even when it is when the trains are running, there's going to be a massive reduction in
the answer there is...
Very quickly.
The answer there is for the government to get back step back and let the employers and the union work it out.
No,
we were
I'm
less than an hour from a deal. Less than an hour.
It's in Mick Lynch's interests to make this government versus unions.
This
anyway,
is all
coming up,
political
the
instead
Labour...
of working for the member.
Moving on.
To work for the members, and I think he's playing party politics, and I think it's been party politics throughout all of this.
We must move on.
Very sadly.
But we can make further points later. Coming up, the Labour leader confronts business and says it's time to end dependence on low-wage immigration. Do you believe him? Do you trust him? Do you agree with him? Let me know.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky. That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs and Co. Things got a little bit heated before the break about the rail strikes. Let me know what you think. Do you support Mick Lynch? Perhaps you do at home. Anyway, joining me until 7, I will reintroduce my panel. We have former MEP, now Conservative Life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, here with us till 7, and Atul Hatwell, the editor of Labour Uncut. Now, you've been sending in your opinions thick and fast on the rail strikes that are going ahead apparently in December and January, just in time for Christmas in December anyway. Kevin says, Baroness Foster is ignorant of union processes. Regional organisers are in constant communication with local union members during industrial action times. I presume he meant to finish that. Anything to say? Any rebuttal? It doesn't seem like she is. Jacqueline seems to know quite a lot about these things, I would say. And also, Steve says, Mick Lynch wants more money and jobs for life. Mick Lynch is economic with the truth, and his objective is to bring down the government by galvanising other unions to strike. I mean, he has actually said that. He does want coordinated strike action across the public sector and across public services. So that's no conspiracy. That is certainly what he wants. Now we're going to move on. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer presented his CV to the business world today, in a way, with a speech at the CBI conference. Business leaders are calling for more immigration to address worker shortages, but the leader of the opposition said Britain has to instead wean itself off cheap labour. Starmer says he'll be pragmatic about immigration, using it to plug skills gaps. Now, Jacqueline, as a Conservative, are you buying this from Keir?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the thing is, you will always get a mismatch of skills. I mean, we know that. It doesn't matter how many people you will, for example, have that are unemployed. I think where we've got a real concern is we have now about another 2 million people. It's about 5.5 million people now of working age who are actually at home and on benefits. Now, obviously, a proportion of those people will never be able to work or can't work for various reasons. But what we have to do is to try and make sure in-house, that's in the UK, where I would agree, we need to start getting people back into the workplace. I think in an unintended consequences way, when he uses this phrase cheap labour, you're not sure what cheap labour is supposed to mean. We know, for example, that there were many people came from abroad that would work in the agricultural sector, and they came for years and did worked on the farms and various things like that. But, you know, we have a minimum wage in place. We have strict rules on paying conditions. We have employment legislation, which is in place. And then you've got this sort of dichotomy, because over the years, and it started with the Blair government, actually, we want to get more and more people into university. So if we're looking at getting, you know, 40 or 50% of people into university, and then we're looking at the jobs, which would be, we'd say traditionally blue collar, or that wouldn't be, you wouldn't be really earning huge amounts of money, for example, you've also got to make sure that you're going to be able to get the people in the workforce to be able to do that. And we know for a fact that we had many opportunities. We were trying to get a British workforce back into working maybe in agriculture and whatever, and they couldn't do it.
And it hasn't
happened. It was also one of the reasons. I think there's another thing that I'm always uneasy with, and it's the fact if you're looking at skilled professionals, we know that there are countries out there, and I was on the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific Joint Assembly for 5 years, and I've lived in other countries, and obviously, as you said, been in the European Parliament. And I always feel uneasy about taking the skilled people from some of these countries who actually need them. If you were looking at doctors...
So
and
from
dentists,
a moral angle?
It's not even just a moral angle. They will need those people to build their infrastructures, which is actually a way to go to dealing with migration, and people are hopefully less likely to want to move away because of the standard of living. Now, so I think it's a complex area.
It is a very complex area, and of course there are massive labour market shortages, and yes, the amount of people who are on out-of-work benefits and not working of working age is considerable, and that will be adding to the problem. Now, New Labour, they were the ones who opened the doors, one could say, to mass immigration. So essentially, are they to blame for the fact that our economy is addicted to cheap labour because they were the ones who wanted it?
It's not about being addicted to cheap labour. It's about plugging the skills gaps in your labour market and enabling business and public services to thrive. If you want to look back to the New Labour years, growth year on year, the highest for 30 years, budget surpluses, fully funded NHS, fully funded public services, no need to wait for, see a GP 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, within 2 days, waiting times slashed. That's what fully staffed services deliver. Companies thriving, taxes off the charts. That's what thriving businesses deliver. The underpinning of our economy is growth. And in this one respect, Liz Truss was right. You need growth. And if public service is saying labour shortages are holding us back, then that needs to be addressed. In the medium term, of course, it's right to train British workers. That's the most commonsensical, non-controversial thing to do. But what we do know is that governments over the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years haven't done a terribly good job of it. Priority number one, grow our economy, fund our services.
I think the problem is that a lot of people see the government's attempts... Well, the government strategy at the moment, this isn't Keir Starmer's remarks, but the government hasn't articulated a proper economic strategy, have they? It seems that importing labour from abroad is one of the key cornerstones of it. And insulating more homes, it seems. There wasn't much in that autumn statement for those of us who want economic growth. And I do think it's not what voters want. It's not what Conservative voters want for an economy to be dependent on more and more migration.
Well, I'm in complete agreement. And I understand, obviously, it's very difficult for me sitting here as a Conservative today. I'm not wholly supportive of the autumn statement. Actually, the point that Liz Truss came up with, that mini-budget, which actually the Labour Party supported, apart from the change in the top rate of tax, in terms of reducing corporation tax, IR35, getting rid of that for small business, etc. OK, the timing was all wrong. But in terms of what your philosophy is as a politician and a party, the philosophy of the Tory party is about low tax and small state and obviously getting outward investment and all of this. But at the end of the day, I see, obviously, huge steps that they've taken, obviously, to protect the most vulnerable. Yeah. But equally, I see a lack of any move to encourage inspiration. I think we've hit the middle earners. And that's your people who are probably just gone on to 40%. I said it actually a couple of weeks ago on here. They're paying over 50% out of their wages before they, that's all that they have got.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, people are looking at...
I think it's ludicrous. And you've got to have growth. You've got to have inspiration. If I may pick up on a brief point, it was in 2004 when there was enlargement, and the other European Union states allowed 7 years for transition, and the Blair government just basically opened the doors, and that started to put pressure on, which obviously took a number of years to come through. When Labour came into power in 1997, they inherited actually a very strong economy with the top rate of tax.
I must say on that, I think a lot of people were very angry because they saw Tony Blair open the doors to more immigration from the European Union, and they saw wages being undercut. Yeah. And also, it seems like our public services have never been able to keep up with demand, not least the housing crisis, and it doesn't seem that any politician of any stripe is going to do anything about that.
So let me pick up on that, because you've ascribed a bunch of issues to immigration which aren't related. What immigration helped with in the 2000s was fully staffed, effective public services. That's why you didn't have to wait more than 2 days to see a GP. That's why there were no waiting times on the scale where we've got 400,000 people waiting over a year for an operation. And when it comes to things like housing, the primary issue there was around planning. In the last year of the Labour government, in Gordon Brown's administration, 224,000 homes built. If we'd have continued at that rate, much of the housing crisis would have been addressed. And the reason we didn't continue, was partially austerity and the financial crash. One of the things that is important, understand what immigration does and what it doesn't do. Because if you load things like issues around housing on immigration, it will never be solved, because it's around planning and some of those other drivers that need to be addressed.
Right, we'll be coming back to this very soon because, I think it's an essential topic. I don't think many people trust either party when it comes to immigration. They've been told time and time again that numbers will come down, yet all they see is numbers going up. And, of course, then there's illegal crossings, which seem weirdly impossible to solve. Anyway, coming up, Shell says it's reviewing future investments in the UK after Jeremy Hunt extended the windfall tax. We'll be getting stuck into that very shortly.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, after a backlash to England's barnstorming debut in Qatar, is it offensive to celebrate black excellence? Can slippery Keir Starmer really be trusted to tackle the migrant crisis? Plus, Liz Truss loyalist and former member of her cabinet, Ranil Jayawardena, breaks his silence on the globalist coup that ousted the 50-day PM. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs and Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
That's why we ended up with
We're having lots of heated debate back here in the studio during the break. You're back with Dewbs and Co with me, Emily Carver. Joining me until 7, my panel, former MEP, now Conservative Life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster, and of course Atul Hatwell, the editor of Labour Uncut. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch over the immigration question. Do you trust Starmer when it comes to weaning our economy off cheap labour, in his words? Andrew says, I'm afraid to admit that I don't trust anyone in Westminster to sort the problem, and I think that's pretty fair, to be honest. The Conservatives haven't done much to get immigration down like they promised. Remember their pledge to get immigration to tens of thousands? That never seemed to happen, and I think Sunak's completely shelved that. At least his ministers have. David says, to me, Keir is being politically opportunist. He is the leader, but his MPs have far different agendas if they get into power. And this is the thing. Keir Starmer is pretending, in my view, this is only my view, pretending to be very centrist. But of course, he was very happy to stand behind Jeremy Corbyn, who's very much for open borders and everything like that, and stand in front of many of his backbenchers who are extremely left-wing and would like to see open borders as well. So it does seem like this is a bit of a cynical ploy to get the red wall and blue-collar voters back on board with the Labour project, but call me a cynic. Carol says there are enough jobs in this country that our own can do, given a proper wage, so many people are better off on benefits. That isn't right. That's very true. If work doesn't pay, where's the incentive to go to work? And that's one of those huge questions that the government should be confronting, really. Now, energy giant Shell says it's evaluating plans to invest £25 billion in the UK over the next 10 years after the government extended a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. The tax on North Sea suppliers was raised from 25% to 35% in the autumn statement and extended to 2028. Now, this is what some economists warned would happen. That these big oil and gas companies, who of course have investments all across the world, might think, actually, the tax system in the UK doesn't seem to be particularly stable. I'm better off taking my money elsewhere. Am I wrong?
I think it's an astute communications move by Shell. They're sending a signal. But these decisions aren't made on an incremental change on windfall tax. It's a 10-year decision. And that's based on some economic fundamentals and their view as to whether that investment is going to pay back in this country. And if we want to look at why corporates and business may not be investing, probably look no further than a tanking economy as to why they think why they would have less confidence here. But I do think evaluating is not the same as canning. And I'd be amazed if a business of that scale made a choice based on an incremental change in a tax, which is happening this year. And let's not forget that windfall tax is applied to supernormal profits, where they have made eye-watering sums of money, billions upon billions upon billions of pounds, because of what President Putin has done in invading Ukraine.
But Jacqueline, in this country, it does seem to me that it's probably quite difficult in a way for oil and gas companies to understand what investing in Britain means. We have eco-activists, of course, getting very angry about any new exploration. Fracking's definitely not a goer in this country. The government seems to change their mind on taxes every day of the week. And surely, whether it's not about this particular decision, if there's not a stable environment for businesses to decide how to invest, isn't that the issue?
Well, it is. And the thing is, it's all very well sitting there saying we're open for business. Shell is an Anglo-Dutch company. BP. I mean, these companies hold billions in pension funds. These are not sort of Johnny-come-lately companies and they're going to make a quick buck. But these companies and others have been pioneers, basically, of, providing us with energy from the North Sea and other areas over decades. Whether people like it or not, 80% of fossil fuel is what we need across the planet. I mean, it's 80%. Of course, we can move into alternative ways of doing this, but we are reliant industrial powers are reliant on these companies doing that. Now, I think what was also missed off there was actually they pay a higher rate of corporation tax too. So it's not just that it's 35 or it's gone from 25 to 30. They're already paying over 60%. And they're the companies we're saying to these companies, we want you to invest, we want you to get cracking, we want to make sure that we're not going to be left without, obviously, energy supplies over the future. Now, to me, you're sending out a mixed message. And I don't agree with it.
But, I must put the other side, because I do completely understand why possibly many people sitting at home watching this are saying these companies are making record profits at a time when all of us are finding it harder and harder to pay our bills and the taxpayers having to subsidise our energy bills. It's costing us all huge amounts. Shouldn't they take the brunt when they're doing so well out of it?
Well, I think they take the brunt anyway. And I think this additional amount that we're talking about, I'm not sure how much that is that goes towards your energy bill or whatever. I just think we have to take it in the round. I mean, I was a great supporter of re-looking at shale gas extraction or fracking. And, and we pushed for this. We have got energy under our feet in this country where, if you're looking long term, we could be virtually self-sufficient.
Well, unfortunately, the science doesn't the science doesn't really support that.
Well, science actually does support it.
Let Atul.
It has been a if I may finish, the reason that we haven't, because the National Geological Society, there was a big report on this. I and others were not proposing looking at shale gas extraction because it was some dangerous thing to do. We had local authorities and others turned it into a political football and turned round and basically said, if you come anywhere near us, and they were all Labour councils, you're not going to be able to do it here.
Is that the anti-growth coalition?
It wasn't Labour councils that revolted against Liz Truss that night in the Commons.
We were dealing with this for 12 months.
Drawing a red line.
There were some, but it was predominantly.
And I'd like to put this when it comes to the windfall tax and on the oil companies, it's a simple binary choice for viewers. Either the money comes from supernormal profits that the oil companies make, or it comes from their wallet.
Now, something that
that money's going to go take money off their energy bill.
Something that frustrates me about some of the discussion about this is this sort of assumption that these oil and gas companies are there to be demonised, and that suddenly we could switch them off and we'd be living in some kind of green utopia. Do you think that essentially oil and gas companies, that we won't need them anymore? We don't need them anymore? Are they done, finished?
There's two different debates here. There's a debate about the move to a more sustainable planet and the move towards net zero. That's one thing, and that has transition costs, but it's essential for our medium-term well-being. The windfall tax, though, is very much around two things. One, the incredible profits they've made and the fact we're in a blooming massive hole with massive amounts of debt and someone's got to pay it, and that choice is very simple. Either some of these people who've done very well or British taxpayers. And I stand with British taxpayers.
Well, Nick says let them go. Oil is coming to an end. The quicker we switch, the less power they have. 25 billion, you can keep it. So there's someone who's presumably very much in favour of windfall taxes. And Colin from Durham says, who can blame them? This windfall and corporation tax increase are criminal. I'm CEO of a small company. They're going to hammer us with these tax increases. Who do you agree with there at home? Nick? who thinks that oil's coming to an end, get rid of them, tax them. Colin, who says, you know, the government are putting so many taxes up on these businesses, he doesn't blame them for rethinking their investment in this country. Let me know. But coming up, a Conservative think tanker resigns his position. It's not great news for the Conservative Party at the moment, I must say. Resigns his position and says the party has failed his generation. Is he right?
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
We can't stop chatting in the break over here at GB News anyway. Welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Emily Carver. Joining me is my panel still, former MEP, now Conservative life peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster and Atul Hatwell, the editor of Labour Uncut. Now, I just want to go very quickly to some of your comments on the windfall taxes, because I can see both sides. I can see why people are frustrated with the amount of money that these oil companies are making. Mike says, what about the profiteering the oil companies cashed in on? But another GB viewer, who hasn't left a name, says no to windfall taxes, totally outrageous. We need these companies, we want the oil and gas, and we need the new contracts and licences. This is where I worry. Some of these populist measures like windfall taxes do have unintended consequences, and we've seen in the past that windfall taxes on oil and gas has led to less investment. Now, the founder of the Conservative think tank Bright Blue has quit his position and says the Tories are failing his generation. Ryan Shorthouse says millennials who entered the labour market in the 12 years since the Conservatives came into power have been hit by, in quotes, punishing housing and childcare costs, as well as stagnant wages. Is it more millennial moaning, or does he have a point? I imagine you sympathise with this. Are you a millennial still?
Oh, good grief. No.
Or still? Have you ever been a millennial?
No, never. Gen X. Top end of Gen X as well.
Oh, you look young.
I think the point he makes is absolutely right. There is a generational betrayal happening. So for the last 50, 60 years, there's been an expectation as you sort of go through school that you're going to go to work and you'll have a reasonable crack at owning your own home. That, unless you've got rich parents, is a dream that is evaporating for hundreds of thousands, millions of people, because it's just out of reach. And the sky-high rents that people have to pay, I'm lucky I don't have to do that, I have my own home, but the sky-high rents where so much of a wage goes in rent
But you know what, I don't own my own home yet. I'm 30 years old, and something in me, I don't know what it is, but I don't feel the need to complain about it as if it's someone else's fault necessarily. But I do take your point. Housing costs and also childcare costs are out of control. That is true.
You know, if you want to live in the centre of London, most people are not going to be able to buy anywhere.
So they should just up sticks and move?
No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, I didn't have a mortgage or get somewhere, and I'm in the last century, never mind millennium. I'm the last millennium, I think. And I was well in my 30s, and I had a mortgage and I paid 8%, about 8% in interest rates. And I don't agree with Ryan, really. You know, we've put... When I was at school, very few people went to university. The working class was a much bigger part of society. And then we had grammar schools and various things, and some of us then obviously didn't do jobs that our parents did, mine were both sort of blue-collar. They left school at 14. So the opportunities that children have had over these last decades and the numbers going to university, which was, as you quite rightly say, with Tony Blair, they kicked it off, let's go and get more people into university. And quite rightly, their expectations are going to be that they're going to be doing jobs where they're going to be able to earn more, and they're not going to be looking at the jobs, the sort of blue-collar type jobs, which have to be done. Who's going to work in the food processing plant, for example?
Is there a difference in expectations? Because when I speak to my parents, they didn't go out for dinner, they didn't go on holidays, they didn't, you know, buy themselves lots of new things. Do you think that although housing costs are out of control, young people have different priorities? They will prioritise going travelling, for example, or for going out to bars or restaurants, more so than previous generations would have done?
The fundamental difference is the gap between what you're bringing home in your annual salary and what it costs to buy a house. 50 years ago, you could buy a house, you know, wherever in London or wherever, £8,000, £9,000, £10,000. Whatever you were earning, it was within reach. And if you made little sacrifices, you don't go on holiday, you can get, that thing comes within reach. If the gap is hundreds of thousands of pounds, you can stop eating avocado, you can stop watching Netflix, you can make all the savings you want. You're never going to be in the ballpark of getting
there
that.
Are so
and
many...
that lift off of that of prices in housing.
It's so complicated though as well, because younger people are taking much more time before they settle down with a partner, if they do at all. So, you know, 2 salaries are better than 1. And often there's only 1 because people aren't coupling up as quickly. But I do think the Conservatives have sort of abandoned any emphasis on the family, on trying to help, you know, young couples get onto the housing ladder. I think that he does have a point.
Well, I don't think that's the Conservatives particularly. I think if you look at the way times have moved on, when I was 50 years ago, I couldn't have bought a flat, I couldn't have bought a place in London. I was here in London. I didn't earn enough, and I worked for a big company. I couldn't have got a mortgage, and that would have been even in outer London. So, you know, I know what you're saying, but then we could look and we could say, OK, well, if people get married, why don't we pay them a married person's allowance? And then, of course, that was always ruled out because times have moved on and a lot of people cohabit and they don't get married anymore.
And
then then that was seen as being discriminatory because somebody was not married, that they, you know...
It's an minefield.
It was like a minefield, frankly.
The issue here isn't about
and also,
a tax intervention, it's about reforming housing.
Very quickly, and then I'll give you the last word.
I've lived on four different countries. The emphasis on home ownership is bigger in the UK than it's anywhere else because more people, certainly on the continent, tend to rent.
Yes.
And it's not, and they rent for life, and they don't find an issue with it. We've always done, you know, bricks and mortar. And I support that.
But that's not much of a. That's not much. I mean, as a young person, you know, if your parents have had a house and your grandparents have had a house, of course you want a house. That's part of our culture.
No issue with that.
Paul does say Kel Surprise, a millennial, is sulking because the world isn't set up purely for his own benefit. That's a bit harsh, Paul, but I do get your point.
Absolutely.
The answer here isn't
Very quickly.
the answer here isn't about a married couple's tax allowance. That's not going to help someone buy a house. It won't be of the scale. The issue is building more homes and reforming planning.
I have to finish now. I'm so sorry. I'm getting shouted at in my ear. You've been sending in your opinions, which I won't be able to come to. But thank you so much for joining me this evening. Of course, Jacqueline Foster, former MEP, Baroness for life peer, and also Atwell Hatwell, who is from Labour Uncut. Thank you very much. Nigel Farage will be with us at 7 o'clock. Nigel, what's coming up on your show?
Thank you very much. Lively debate. Well, you could knock me down with a feather. Here we now have a Labour Party who are to the right of the Conservative Party on immigration. It's almost unbelievable, but Starmer's speech today to the CBI made it clear we've got to start training our own people, stop relying on imports of labour. I'll be asking tonight and debating, who do you, the public, now trust more on this key question of immigration? But before all of that, let's get the weather.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Showers will ease in many places overnight, leading to a clear and chilly night, at least at first, before more rain arrives in the west later. That rain coming quite quickly from the Atlantic, courtesy of this low and this area of weather fronts. Well, ahead of that, another set of weather fronts slowly clearing from the east and northeast, still bringing some wet weather to Orkney for the early part of the evening. That wet weather pushing into Shetland, along with some gale force winds. Otherwise, lighter winds, clear spells for many. And for Scotland, northern and eastern England, a widespread frost. Temperatures close to zero, if not a little below in some sheltered spots. But a different story for Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Here, it's a wet and windy start to the day, a milder start as well, but the rain will be intense even if it is fairly short-lived. It pushes through the rest of England into Scotland by lunchtime, and it tends to ease into showers by the